Manheim, the right lane is closed there. On Eisenhower, there's a brief slowdown. Ashland into the Burns Circle. Same goes for the inbound Stevenson from Ashland to the Ryan. The inbound Ryan has traffic bunching up just a bit between Cermak and Roosevelt. In River Grove, River Road is still closed between First Avenue and Irving Park due to the flooding. Same true of Chicago Street in Joliet, south of I-80. That's expected to be fixed, though, by tomorrow. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Here's your official Chicagoland weather forecast with meteorologist Steve Williams.
Today, mostly cloudy with a high at 70. Partly cloudy tonight, low 55. Partly sunny day tomorrow, the high 73. A shower or thunderstorm for the weekend, the high Saturday 79. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Right now, it's 58 degrees. Your next news update coming up in 30 minutes. For continuous coverage of news, traffic, and weather, go to 560theanswer.com. I'm Elisa Z. Now the latest from the Fox Business Network on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Alpha Wealth Group, bringing the trilogy of estate, tax, and investment planning together. Visit alphawealthgroup.com for a free report.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Rich Lowry, writing in National Review, asks, where does Florida Governor Ron DeSantis go to get his apology? I don't think DeSantis wants an apology, really. If his response to the press corps during his White House visit was any indication, I think he just wants the record set straight in terms of what was said and what the outcomes were.
Our data is available. Our data is transparent. In fact, Dr. Birx has talked multiple times about how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. Not only do we have a lower death rate, well, we have way lower deaths generally, we have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the #1 landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the #1 hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
Last question.
How about that?
Well,
How about Ron DeSantis?
I gave him the mutza for opening the borders. I mean, for the beaches. When I heard he was opening the beaches and we were all going to die and everyone was going to die, you know, just like in Zulu where Jack Hawkins says, you're all going to die. Well, yeah, I gave him the mutza. I can't take it back because once it's, the Greeks say, my people, once it's given, it can't come back. But I'm kind of sorry, Ron.
No,
right?
That's okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. You know, as long as you're not in the narrative spinning business, which is what he's really decrying. And by the way, it is worth noting, as compared to Andrew Cuomo, who sent nursing home patients who had been infected back to nursing homes, perhaps the most catastrophic decision any governor in the country has made, and yet he's America's governor, per the media press coverage. Ron DeSantis took note of what was happening, what we were seeing from other states going all the way back to the nursing home in Seattle at the end of January, and said, particularly with the age of the population and the number of nursing homes and senior living communities
the villages,
in Florida.
All the crazy stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, he said, well, we need to move to protect the older. And thus, what do we see in Florida? A lethality rate in nursing homes that have seen infection that is a fraction of all of those other states that he mentioned, with New York at the top. And we're talking about this against the backdrop of nursing home deaths comprising the majority of COVID-19 related deaths in the world, a majority in many states, a supermajority in many states, and a plurality in a lot of other states as well. For more on all of this policy confusion and the debate that rages on as the country opens up, we're pleased to be joined by Homan Jenkins, columnist, editorial writer, and member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. His maiden voyage with us, and we're so appreciative to have him, and we're appreciative of John Cass, because the only reason he dared to talk to me, John, is because you're here, and he's a big fan of yours. Homan Jenkins, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, I would have been happy to speak with you anyway, but I am a big John Cass fan.
Well,
let me put that on the record.
You know, don't you hate that it becomes awfully treacly where writers praise each other? But given what Dan just said about DeSantis and the press and all that, I'd like to quote you something, sir. All this has been largely lost on a press incapable of functioning without reducing every public question to a dualism of incompatible stances. Homan Jenkins in the Wall Street Journal. Isn't that where we are in our business?
It certainly is with respect to the lockdowns. The lockdowns were never dictated by science. They were a purely political response, but the press has to continue to justify them retroactively because the press got on board in such a big way. And that's exactly why you have the Florida situation, where they predicted disaster for Florida because that was the model they had bought for no really good scientific reason.
And one of the other points you make in that same piece that John was referring to is that, look, what you had, and this is somewhat predictable too for people who observe how politicians behave, is sort of everybody sounding the alarms, and public health professionals sounding alarms. So that created fear. So then everybody ran to the sound of the applause. And once a few people did, then everybody did. And frankly, including President Trump.
Yeah, Trump did for a while, too. You know, really started in Wuhan. The Chinese government really saw a threat there to the party's control, and so they adopted this lockdown strategy that probably didn't make any sense for Wuhan, but that became the model for the world of how you act forcefully against this virus. And so it was adopted everywhere simply because of the applause meter and because that's what the media wanted. It was never dictated by science. The idea that you stop all economic activity in places that had not yet seen the virus or didn't have, overwhelming demand on their hospital systems, that was never part of any pandemic preparedness plan. It went against the plan, but that was the approach everybody adopted.
I wonder what you think of, in order to do such a thing, in order to shut down our commerce and have Americans cowering in their homes and worried about fear and talking about fear constantly. You have to have a culture that would accept such a premise and such talk. I wonder, what do you think about Americans and risk? There was a time when
Americans ride motorcycles, Americans engage in skydiving, Americans volunteer for the SEALs and for the Army Rangers. There's two Americas out there. There's the snowflake America, and there's the hardy sort of can-do America. And they're having a hard time living with each other right now, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean,
the snowflake America dominated journalism.
Well,
unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Well, and it seems like there's this socioeconomic divide, too. I mean, Michael Lind from University of Texas says the divide in America is really the divide between those who have a college degree and those who don't, essentially. And we see that sort of bearing out in the polling. Scott Rasmussen, only 34% of Americans trust government officials more than everyday Americans. Just a third. But guess what? Guess who comprises that third? By a 64 to 32% margin, those upper-income voters, the upper-income voters, still think the lockdowns have done more good than harm. So it's a fraction of the overall population, but that fraction is dominated by people who dominate the media and the cultural institutions that drive public policy choices, and to some extent shape public opinion, or at least have the ability to quiet cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, but in the long run, all they're doing is destroying the credibility of the institutions that we use to send messages out to the public. You look at how completely the media is in disrepute with a large part of America. You can't go on being at odds with reality as long as some of our media institutions and political institutions are, without basically just losing the backing of the American people. That's what I'm worried about. If this lockdown was necessary, the whole bunch of Americans wouldn't believe in it anyway because they learned not to trust their government.
Right, and also too, it's one of those things where because the media believes they're on the side of right, and a lot of politicians do too. They have this sort of like Sir Galahad theory of life. Because I'm the most pure of heart, everything I do is above reproach. And so they come across as omniscient, or at least as knowing things they don't know, including the experts that everybody references. Rely on the science, rely on the professionals, rely on the experts. And then the story out yesterday that after it's not just mask wearing, the reversal on that. It's a story out yesterday that after all the talk for 6 weeks about contamination, COVID transmission through contaminated surfaces, we find out from the CDC that no, we were wrong. The transmission via COVID on surfaces is not very likely.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is the problem of not having enough knowledge to begin with. We were in a situation of radical uncertainty, but the media hates that, so they invent answers to questions that they don't have answers to, and that's the problem. And then they get wedded to them. They have to defend them for the sake of their own self-image, and so it's like unraveling the Russia collusion conspiracy. It's taken an unbelievable amount of time and legwork to get take away this belief that the media promoted, and still a lot of them cling to it because once they get invested, they can't let go.
No matter how many Susan Rice emails are declassified.
But how do you expect? What's been interesting the last few days, you started it a while ago with what the FBI cover-up is covering up, and then your colleague, James Freeman?
Yeah,
Jim
Freeman,
right?
Yeah.
James Freeman wrote a great piece about the media writer at the New York Times, which I thought was devastating and perfect. And then from the left, you have Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi also weighing in. How does... If you're the editor of the Washington Post or the New York Times, and I know Dean Baquet, I worked with him when we were chasing aldermen together. Don't you want to walk back this cat before it all comes out? Don't you want to have your own, say, another crack team of journalists trying to figure out how your own people and those of the Post were manipulated by deep state actors or Kemalist actors? If you forgive me for using my own term.
You ask a great question. I wrestled with that myself, and all I can come down to is that we are a media now that's increasingly reliant on reader subscriptions. We don't have that big insulating advertising spend to protect us. And so, Dean Baquet is terrified. It comes across in his public statements of social media and people attacking the New York Times if it diverges from the narrative, even for a moment. And I think that drives a lot of this. It's very hard to... If you're depending on subscribers to pay your bills, it's very hard to disappoint them by delivering the story they don't want.
It's sort of a remarkable
position. My Twitter feed then, being in Chicago.
Well, but it's just sort of a remarkable position to take because it seems to me that you could make a very persuasive argument, perhaps a more persuasive argument, by saying you may not like Trump, and there's all sorts of good reasons to not like him, to disagree with him, to not vote for him, but that doesn't mean that he's a Russian agent. I mean, that doesn't sound like an outlandish position to take, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's the whole idea that you take a position on a factual matter based on whether you like Trump or not. That's not good journalism. What we mean by objectivity in journalism is exactly that. You judge facts by the factual information, not by whether you like or dislike or are in favor or opposed to the person stating the fact.
And just against the backdrop of the unemployment claims number today of 2.4 million, so now we're north of 38 million over the last 2 months. One of the things that policymakers also not omniscient about, how this all unravels. There is a lot of pain and suffering yet to come, And there should be some expectation control in that direction as well, it seems to me.
Yeah, no, that really is the big experiment. We understand the virus better than we understand the consequences we have loosed in our economy with these indiscriminate lockdowns. Nothing like this has ever happened before, and we are going to be paying for it in ways we can't yet foresee, probably for decades to come, especially in the career prospects and the earning prospects of younger people. It's really going to be bad. We are going to regret this so much, I am certain.
He is Homan Jenkins. He's columnist, editorial writer, and member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. His column is must read. Homan Jenkins, real pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks. It was good to be with you guys.
Thank you, Homan.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Do you want to get rid of your expensive landline, save money, but keep your important home telephone number? Then OurOldNumber.com has the perfect solution. OurOldNumber.com allows you to keep your home phone number and cancel that expensive landline connection. With OurOldNumber.com, calls from family and friends to your home phone number are answered by a personal greeting from you. The caller selects which family member they want to reach, and the call is immediately forwarded to that family member's cell phone. Your important home phone number is still your number. It's still in directory assistance, and no matter where you happen to be, you'll never miss a call. There's no equipment to buy, there's nothing to install, there are no long-term contracts, and it's only $9.99 per month. Best of all, OurOldNumber.com eliminates those annoying sales calls. Now, your home telephone number can be as mobile as you and your family are with Our